We are honored for you guys to come and join us tonight. It's an eGGSA meeting, and our guest speaker tonight is Petro Coreejes-Brink. She's been doing genealogy for a very long time. She's involved in the archive. She's working at CPUT. She's in the libraries there. At one time, she was president of eGGSA. And we are fortunate to have her here tonight to tell us all about oral history. Petro, baie dankie. We appreciate it.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen and then we're going to run through my slides. Omri, you might have remembered that you were the first one inviting me to talk about oral history in 2008 in your museum.
Oh,
yes.
That's long ago.
And very long ago. So it was quite a journey for me looking at what I presented to your staff at that stage versus what we're going to talk about tonight.
Right.
I'm a culture historian as well, and the difference between a historian and a culture historian is the culture historian will love oral history and see it as the major source. The historian will always try and find in some way some sort of documentation to prove something that's oral or the item that they see. So if there's no paper trail, they might say, it might not be. For a culture historian, taking your word for it and finding all the details afterwards, that's just a discovery. But we'll take your word for now. For genealogy, we do look at a lot of resources. And specifically when we look at familia and the past 3 familias that we did, there's a lot of oral history sources that come in via documentations, and people struggle to make reference to that, struggle to give us enough information. So tonight I'm going to tell you a little bit more about oral history, and I'm going to end off with looking at oral history projects within South Africa and sources that are already available for us out there. Okay, so here we go. So we're not just going to talk about oral history, but I'm going to focus a little bit more about it as a source. Now, after tonight, I want you to be so excited about this type of source as I am. And when I do my genealogy sort of research, this is where I normally start. I don't run to the archives or church records and so on. I start here, and then I work from the family myths to finding the facts. Now, these 2 ladies, one of them is my great-grandmother, so you will see some sort of family resemblance, the one in the white. So just that's why I'm using these photos. I'm not going to tell you a little bit, I'm not going to tell you about how it's discovered and where I found that and so on, but throughout the presentation you'll see some photos, family photos, and some other documentations that popped up via oral history sort of discussions with family members. So we're going to look at reasons for recording oral histories, types of interviews, what you need to take with you when you do these type of recordings, and then some tips when you do the recordings, and then getting the best information from your interview, and then ask for items. Sometimes people give items up to you as a researcher, and that becomes your treasure trove for the future that you can pass on. And then let's talk, and I'll end off with some oral history projects in South Africa specifically, not in Canada. So I haven't looked that far. Okay, so here we go. Some reasons for interviews. People just want to find the family history, okay? They just want to chat about whatever the family done with no specific order, with no formality, just a nice talk. Sometimes there's medical reasons, and that's something that we, with our DNA testings, that come up a lot more. And the way that you'll find it 3 or 4 generations along the line, there's no track. There might be some evidence in photos or letters, but the medical reasons are quite good, are documented at the University of Stellenbosch, how oral history are used within a medical profession. Then there's lots of documentations about townships and areas that you'll find specifically in your African townships, rural townships, or even in the Northern Cape, where there's a lot of focus on recording other type of culture, historical facts that might not be recorded in archives or in books. Then you just want to talk to a family member to find more family that you might not have known. Now, this is where Facebook and all of those other social medias help you as well. But sometimes you get a link of somebody you haven't even with a total different surname that you might have totally missed. Then, unfortunately for genealogists, they sometimes leave oral history recordings till the final last before they do a publication. And that's almost too late. Because that can really rock the foundation of your whole publication, your book, your article. So that's why I say I'm always starting with oral history first and then work backwards. For me, that's not backwards. For me, it's moving from the base point to the more facts. And then the stories. Finding those stories that will disappear, finding the stories about this king and that king that were part of your ancestors, trying to follow where that line will be. And then those stories become the articles that you write for Familia or your newsletters in your branches, or just stories that you tell other families, and it becomes a story that you will take from one generation to the next generation, telling it to your children. So the types of interview, there's telephonic interviews. I pick up my phone and I call somebody and I do a follow up on a specific fact. We're so used to the Zoom, Skype, and Teams, Microsoft Teams, or any other platforms chatting to you like we're doing now. We're so into that. And unfortunately, it's taking over our lives, but it's a good methodology of recording something. And please press the record button when you do a discussion like this. And we hope in future that there will be more in-person discussions. Now, a lot of our researchers traveled throughout the country, meeting up with family members or people that might know. But in government, there's a whole project where they send young children, school children or grade 12s into the community to really go and talk to the old people in the community. So that is in an environment where there's no, I can't say no because, yeah, but there's very little technology available. So the in-person communication or interview is still needed. Then third-party interviews. If you can't travel to Cape Town and you want somebody else to do an interview for you, you've got a set of questions. Person is very old, they can't use the telephone, Zoom, or whatever. That is a third-party interview where you go and you do it on behalf of somebody else. So the next one, what do you need to take with you? I mean, this is now covering, let me just see, what do you need to take with you? And I decided I'm going to leave this old photo for you because, yeah, already years ago I used this photo and I had my digital recorder and I had my recorder with my batteries and so on. But so many of us were used to doing this, taking your recorder, pressing the button. Now today, we go with this, our phones, okay? This is our device. It's our camera, it's our video, it's our phone. It can be your pen and your paper. I'm sure it can't be your hand sanitizer. So we're going to pack the hand sanitizer in. We're going to pack in the mask. And for those who don't, we need to pack in the glasses as well if you're a bit old. It might help for the person that you interview as well. So pack in 2 masks for yourself and for the person. You never know. Okay. You can even make a gift bag. But these items are very important in our nowadays lives. And you need to have a list of questions with you. You know, you need to know what you want to find out. So don't go just blindly and say, I want to discuss about the families. Have a list. And it would be interesting if you can send that list to the person before you arrive. And please take lots of time. Nobody that you want to interview want to know that you're only there for half an hour or hour and you want to rush through it. So take lots of time with you, okay? And if they invite you to sleep over, make a plan. And then that making of an appointment. It is, you can't just drop, when you want the best out of an interview, they need to know that you're coming. Now in the next slide, I'm going to show you what you can, I'm going to talk about how you can get people to talk. But making that appointment and giving the person a reason for why you are coming and really what you want. Because people don't really like to talk with a blanket canvas to say, I'm coming to see you and what are you coming to see me for? Okay, so let me just move on. Why are we now stuck? Okay, let me just go. Yeah, then recording tips. You need to make sure that you have the date of the interview recorded. Okay, then you will need to make sure that you've got the right address. And we're going to, when we record, you need to make sure what's your address, what's your full name, what's your maiden name, and then you record that even before you start with your interview. What's the person's career, the age, the full names, your details. Normally you do that, you record that before you walk into the space. And then take a photo of you and the person. This photo was taken in Bloemfontein in 1995, and I knew this person. I knew him 3 years before I really could get to him in Bloemfontein to set up this appointment. Now we're still very good friends, and I see him at least once a year, so I do all those follow-ups. But having the photo of that specific moment when you did your interview, if you can, and even if you do an online interview like on Zoom or Teams, take a photo with your face and that person's face, and you have it recorded, that specific time, that specific moment. And very important, if you interview and you have 3 or 4 people in a room, then I'm going to say, Pete, you said such and such. Sam, you said such and such. So you need to direct so that people listening to the recording know this person is talking now, that person is talking now, and the next. Because they will hear your voice more often, but they might not hear the 3 different voices and know who is talking when. So knowing and calling a person by name when you interview more than one person is key to an interview. Then asking about privacy and publications, may you can explain the POPI Act and all other acts that you want to describe to the person so they understand that if you walk out there, do you have the right to say something, publish something, or put something in a journal, or use it within your book later on? You can even ask a person to sign a sort of a declaration that you can publish the recording that you did. But you need to ask the person as well, can I make a recording of the discussion? If not, then you're stuck with old-fashioned pen and old-fashioned paper. Okay. So that sometimes do happen where people don't want their voices to be recorded. They don't want you to replay it to the family, and it becomes a sensitive matter. So making sure if you can record and if you're just going to jot down a lot of facts as far as possible as you can. Because if you get into that mode, the time that you're going to spend, the paper and pen mode, the time that you're going to spend with a person is going to be very, very long. Taking the recording and having it in a safe space is much better. What I say to people is that when we do a recording with your voice, we're preserving your voice for your family in the future as well. It's not just the discussion that we have, but your voice is a living memory of yourself. So if I can convince the person, I always go from that angle, that it's just not the information and the facts that we're going to talk about, it's really your voice, the way you speak, the way you have pauses in between your words. Some people are good storytellers, and those people are normally pausing and for effect. And that's not something that you can describe when you look at a person's personality. But having a recording of that person, you immediately know this person was a very good storyteller if they do those pauses in between for effect. Getting the best from an interview. These are just small tips that you will get in other documentations as well. Being very friendly. You know, I'm going to tell you, even if you need to be over friendly, that might be the first time that you've ever met, and it might be the last time as well. So here, you need to look pretty, you need to be extremely friendly, and if you can bring up some flowers or something as a gift to sort of emphasize that friendliness, you're here not for fighting, you're here for drinking tea. And if they want to offer you something to eat, you eat. Now, you know, it's very difficult for me. I'm an extremely fussy eater. But if they offer you whatever you need to eat, you eat. So it's very difficult. You swallow it with water if you need to. But getting out of eating and drinking, if it's offered, yeah, it's sometimes seen as disrespectful if you decline that, except if you say you're fasting. But yeah, then eye contact. Keeping eye contact throughout the discussion. It's extremely difficult if you need to make notes and have eye contact and make sure that your cell phone is still recording, that but you need to multitask around that. If you lose eye contact, you're going to lose some of the good stories. So we're not going to, so that's a small tip, but it makes a big difference. And then you need to do the ums and the ahs. And you go along and you say, "Ooh, this is wonderful, that is wonderful." It doesn't matter if it's not wonderful normally for you. You're not that type of person, but for the interview process, you and ah at the right spaces. Okay. And then sitting as close as possible to the person. Now, this was always very, very important, but today I'm always saying sitting as far as possible from the person. But this is one of those aspects that they teach you when you when you teach how to do oral histories, is sitting close to the person so that you can hear, they can hear you, they can see your facial expressions, and there's no distance between you and the person that you're talking to. But in our situations where we are now, if it's online, you can sit as close as possible to your computer as you want. But if you have an in-person interview, you need to ask now what the person's distance how they feel about that distance. And how you feel about that distance will need to be discussed during that process. But just know, the further you are apart, the less interesting information you're going to find. And that distance really create a distance between you and the person that you are interviewing. And then explaining the purpose and the outcomes. Normally this is done before you even reach the person or have a discussion with the person, so they know what are you really about. What are you going to ask me? Then I said, work on the first set of questions, and if you can send it to the person, wonderful. And then, so important, aftercare. Visit again and make contact again. Phone or email, or if you pop by now and then and say, "Hi, how are you?" And then it's not an interview, it's just the normal, you keep the link going. It's not just you walk in and you walk out. And then saying thank you, even if you found nothing and there's nothing new. And it wasn't really a great discussion, and it was so hard to get information out of the person. The thank yous, and the thank yous the day after, not a week after, the day after makes the biggest impact. Because you might want some questions answered by the person again in the future. So those are the aftercare. Then these things you can ask for, but some people might feel that now you're asking for too much. But before I go to any interviews with any person for oral history recordings, I ask them to please take out some old photos, if there's diaries, family Bibles, letters, postcards, family heirlooms like a cupboard or can be a spoon. And if they can, maybe jot down some family stories or check and see if there's stories written down or some family, stambome. Now I'm lost for words. But if there's any type of research that anybody did, or any cuttings, newspaper cuttings, anything like that, and then any other contact details of any other family members that they might have, that they can sort of jot down for you before you visit. If you've got some of these when you arrive and it's on the table, or people will do really a lot of effort to get some of these items for you. Or you'll come in and they will say, yes, sir, I've searched everywhere and I can't find any of this. Now that's fine. But if they can find some of these items are then your starting points. Before you get to all your other questions, you'll go through the photos. And you'll enjoy the photos, even if it's the same photo all the time. And most of the time with older people, they are willing to give this up to you, or lend it to you so that you can make copies of it, scan it in, and so on. Family Bibles, you're not really going to get your hands on, but you'll be able to take photos of the family Bibles inside. And diaries the same, letters, they might not be able to give it up to you, but at least they made contact with somebody who really cares. And you really care because you are in the family history business. So you'll make sure that whatever you can copy or get will be protected, and it will have a future life. And that's not something that we're going to drink. Okay, so I'm moving on. Now, we're going to have a little short interview with Alta. Now, Alta is a very special person to all of us, and that is now this little bit of fun that we're going to have for the evening. So you'll see her in a format as she likes to be shown now, and then you'll see her in a format how she looked in 2013 with one of her big passions in life. And she's a person that will go, in wild areas to record and make sure that our, so I want to say, this is culture as well. It's preserved for the future. It doesn't matter if they're in the real fluctus, and people might never see them again, because most of the things that she recorded in 2013 in this area are now not visible to other visitors anymore. So she's doing special things for us, but tonight we're not going to talk about a passion for graves, a passion for genealogy. We're going to talk about a bit about herself. Alta, and now normally what I would do with Alta is I would say, Alta, we're going to do a recording today. We're going to talk about your matric farewell many years ago. Yes, Alta. Because it's matric farewell season, I thought tonight this is the topic for our 5 minute discussion. Now, I think we all want to see the dress, but before we get to the dress, Alta, I'm going to make a recording using my cell phone. I need to ask you a few questions before we start, so that we can have this on record. Can I make the recording?
Yes, Petro, you can make the recording, but what do you want to do with the recording? I'm a bit worried about that.
I'm going to save it for if anybody wants to do research about your family, and specifically in the area that you've been at school, because you're not just a member of your family, you're a member of your community. And if anybody wants to do research about your school, this recording is the important bit of a living history. And it's something that we all passed our lives if we do matric. This is one of the highlights of our school careers, but it forms part of a community's life. We all watch Facebook, we see what's happening at the different schools now, and it feels like we're really excited with our community. So are you happy with that?
Yeah, as long as you don't put it in the huisgenoot.
Although it depends on the dress. And it depends if we see in the future that you become so famous that you become president of the GSSA, in the future, we might just use this interview as something special.
As
Okay.
blackmail.
Okay, good. So Alta, so this is recorded. Can we move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, Alta, for my record, and I'm going to make notes as well, so you'll see when you see I'm not focusing on you, I'm making some notes. If you can just give me your full name and your maiden surname.
It's Alta Griffiths, and I was born Rudolph.
Rudolph. Are you only Alta? You don't have a second name?
Carolina.
Okay, you see. So is it
It is
okay, full
C.
names. I'm not going to ask your birth date, but that you can WhatsApp me because this is in a open forum. Okay, so we're not going to ask you that, but that's important as well for the recording.
Okay.
Your career, what would you say are you doing?
I'm a nursing sister.
Nursing sister. Your address?
Is number 12 Bloekom Street in Newlands in Cape Town.
In Cape Town, Newlands, Cape Town. Okay. Good. So I've got enough details, and I recorded my details as well already. So we've got that on record. And today's date is the 12th of October. You ready for me? Comfortable?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Sorry that we can't have this interview in person. It feels very uncomfortable having this interview online, but I hope that we can see in person at some point. Okay, good. Here we go. Okay. Before this interview, I asked you to get some photos for us. Did you get some photos for us?
With difficulty, we had to scratch in the cupboard and get on a ladder.
Okay. Alta, I'm glad you're still with us and didn't fall off the ladder. Can you show one of the photos first for us?
Yes, but sadly it is gone. The color is gone, so I don't know if you can see this. You can't see my pretty dress. It was so pretty.
Now that's what we're going to ask you. What date was the matric farewell?
1978.
Okay, now you're revealing a little bit of your age.
Your age.
1978. What school was that at?
Volkschool in Heidelberg.
Okay, Volkschool in Heidelberg. And I'm sure you were matric and were you 17, 18? What? I'm not sure.
About 18, I think.
You were 18. Okay, so you were not put in school earlier because at some point people matriculated at 13. Okay. So the dress. Where did you get that very beautiful blue dress?
It's a long story, you know. You're so excited when it's your matric farewell. It's all we could talk about. And I was paging through these magazines and I saw this pretty dress and my mother said no. So one day, I grew up in a small town. So, okay, there's just like 2 shops there. So we went to Johannesburg to go and buy me a dress. And I remember my father still said, you are never going to have such an expensive dress again in your life. But there were thousands of dresses on the rail in the shop, and the blue caught my eye, and it was very pretty. Yeah.
Okay. Now, you must have gone with a very special person. Do you have a photo of the person that you... I'm not sure if he asked you, if you ask him. Maybe you can just clarify that for us.
No, we were constant gekeis.
Okay, good. So, Alta, do you have a photo of you with this gekeiste boyfriend?
Yes, it's a nicer photo. It was obviously done by professional photographer.
Ooh, he's so tall and handsome. Tall, dark, and handsome. Something funny or something unique about the evening that you can remember?
Yeah, I remembered my father dropped us off. It wasn't anything funny like now where you've got all these fancy cars and things like that. We just had to get in the car and he dropped us off. And then he went off to have a conversation with one of the teachers and we went into the hall. But inside we were treated and we had Chinese food. Now, if you grew up in a small town like me, it was a real experience to have Chinese food, because I think once before, I only had it once before then. Okay, so that was something foreign. And they still told us that evening, yeah, they had to cook the fish a little bit because the chef wanted to give us to us raw. So, but it was very nice, and that is what I remember of that evening, yeah. But it was done with an award ceremony. It wasn't just a matric farewell, yeah.
Okay.
It was very different.
So, Alta, we all want to know if you have attended the after party, because you look like a type of girl who would go for after parties.
We did not even know that there was such a thing as after parties. We were picked up after the farewell and we went straight home. Maybe it was just a platteland, I don't know.
Okay. Alta, thank you very much for sharing this little moment in your life. One can see there's still a lot of memories, and you're glowing as if it was just happening tonight. Thanks for sharing that with us. Okay.
You're welcome.
Good. Alta had a long lifetime with stories and so on. We don't see a lot and hear a lot about Alta's life, but thanks, Alta, for sharing that with us. Now, these little moments in a person's life we don't always talk about, because what would one say is the genealogy sort of value of such a thing? But for a person, young or old, bringing good memories back and being able to share something about their lives, that's important. And seeing Alta glowing and laughing and giggling, that is how we will always remember Alta when we look at this specific recording. Now, I'm going to share with you my last slide. Oh, my second last slide. Let me just check here. Okay. Now, this is always the question that we get. What is happening in South Africa with oral history projects? Let me just see if I can. This is oral history projects that I came across. Oh, in South Africa. Now, because I've been on the Archives Council and committees for many years, we sort of grew with the oral history projects that the archives are doing. Now, if you look at the website, you'll find this entry, ROS, National Register for Oral Sources of NAROS. Now, each archive are supported by the local province to record oral histories that specific in communities where there's not a lot of documents in archives. So the archives will determine, or the councils will determine, or the managers will determine with the local provincial political parties which areas should oral history be recorded in. Now, most provinces need to do 2 areas in their province per year. But in the last 2 years, as you can understand, people didn't go out. Now, these become quite political, how do you say, visits as well, because you would see that the local MEC for Arts and Culture will go out to, say, for instance, Elim, and they'll have a whole day recording on with older people in Elim about the history of Elim. And the people that are sent is museum people, library people, and archives. Those are the staff that they send with the MEC to do the recordings. They normally, the MEC have professional photographers. They take videos of the recordings, and they record it, audio recorded, and they go with a list of questions. And those lists of questions are predetermined as well. But they get lots of discussions about stories of the community, and a lot of stories about families, and sometimes not a lot of stories about the history of the place, but more about what the people did in the specific place. Or just grootliegverhale, tall tales, You get those type of discussions. Now, after a recording that they did, they will determine, okay, must this go to libraries? Will this go to archives? Now, the things that goes into the archive, this Ross National Register, is only information and recordings of people that add to the value, the historical value of the place. Okay, so there can be family histories in there, but it would not be how to bake a cake or how to bake cook sisters or who's the best farmer in the area. That you will not find. That you'll find in libraries or in museums of the specific area. But the rest goes to the archives. The Cape Archives have already a few of those recordings. And I can't say to you, you will find something on Ross or Naros. You can try, you can check, but it's normally classified according to the areas that's been visited. Okay, then there's another project, the national government. They're talking about the living history or oral traditions, or sometimes they call it living traditions. On this Western Cape link will take you to a document where it describes specifically what is the reasoning behind the oral histories, how it's done, and you'll even find a questionnaire in there. But it's a document that the archives work with and national government work with, and they got experts as well in the field of history to look at the documents, culture history, social history, anthropology, to draw up the specific document as a guideline. So there's some movement, but it's very slow. But at least there's not nothing happening. It's just too slow for any impact in the near future. Then oral history, there's an oral history society. There's oral history, the same abbreviation. There's one in the UK as well. But this South African one have a big membership. It is again sponsored by government. So it gets a lot of money from government. It's got a formal board. If you attend some of their conferences, you'll have from MECs flying in from all different provinces to attend. You'll have anybody from anywhere that have an impact on history and oral history, you'll have them flown in to attend this conference. This is massive. They do have an art journal that's published twice a year. It's an accredited journal as well. So where they normally present the conference proceedings in those journals. The last one that I attended was in 2018. And the work that's done by using the sponsorship from government, paying young people to go into communities and recording the oral histories, to see those young people coming, presenting those oral histories within a conference like that. Because the teams that get trained to do these recordings, then they come back and they need to present some of their findings at these conferences and workshops, where they get support from their mentors and coaches during that process. So they get these sponsorships and they fly in from all over South Africa to discuss. But seeing oral histories being presented in oral form, where a person will tell a whole story of a community within, say, for instance, 10 minutes, it just flows out of that person. It's as if the person remember what they've been told in the community, as if it's their story. And it's something that I've never seen, but it's an African traditional way of remembering your ancestors, remembering key historical facts within your community that you can recite it. We sometimes just sit and we want to just have it on a document. This is a reciting of your ancestors through a period of time. It's quite amazing to see something like that. Then we all know Sandra Prinsloo. If you see her face, it's a very, very iconic actor within South Africa, and she's making a difference. She's involved, I don't know how you translate this, but they call it SBA, Stichting vir Bemagtiging deur Afrikaans. Now there's a story project. She goes into smaller communities where she talks at schools, and at this stage she's doing it virtually. And then they're trying to get older people from the community to talk at the school, to encourage young people to listen to the stories of people in smaller communities. She's been to Worcester, where she spoke to, recently, where she spoke to blind people in the community. Worcester is quite known for the Telebat school for the blind, but the community itself just reached out to a famous person like this in a much different way than where you would normally send anybody else in. So the encouragement of talking, the encouragement of sharing, she's really trying her best to record, and it's specifically Afrikaans. So the recordings that they do is in Afrikaans. So people tell it in their language of choice here, and she only goes into Afrikaans communities. I don't know if they will switch it out to other language groups in the future, but let's just see. Then most of you know about Family Search, and you know what they've done, but this is their aim. They've been working in 90s and early 20s. They've worked in communities in South Africa. And then there was a dull moment, but they're taking this project a little bit further now. So from 2019 to 2024, they envisioned that they're going to have 500,000 interviews in at least 15 countries, where South Africa, Namibia, Botswana, Zim, the SADC countries are all part of those discussions. And they say they are trying to record 190 million names from these interviews. Already they've got 5,000 interview staff in Africa. That's the broader Africa that work for them, that's gaining an income. But here the focus is the language. You need to speak the language of the people that you will be interviewing. So you'll be interviewed by people that can understand you, can transcribe that information in English so that it's searchable within their databases. So we're going to see quite a bit coming from that in the future, how it's going to be presented, or how it's going to become available for us to use as a source that we will need to see. Then there's, again, lots of community projects. I've been part of community projects, but some of you that have children at schools know that community projects within school projects are so important, where they send people out to record information about the communities that they stay in, to tell other children in the class, speaking to the older people in the community. So they're fostering the discussion and the asking of questions from your elders, understanding your community a little bit more already from school level. And that's wonderful because it's part of the curriculum development. And so there's some good work that's been happening in schools, but it's not recorded to take it to the next level, like in the archives or in Family Search records. So that was just sharing some projects with you. And then, just see, it looks like just a last thought. So what I wanted to say to you is, please don't leave things for later.
Yes, I'd like to kick off if I may. Something that's not clear to me. I liked quite a few historical articles, but there's a genealogy input there as well. Now, I went to a 92-year-old woman last week, and she wants me to compile a book so that all her grandchildren can know what her family did. And there's about 5 families, and that's where the Western Cape's going to help me a lot, because they're Western Cape families. But the thing is, she tells me that so-and-so in her family in, say, 1923, or when she was 15 years old, Uncle Louis broke his leg in a horse, on a horse. Now, are we going to expect to verify that information? Or are we going to quote the 92-year-old woman? Or are we just going to put it in as a story? Or are we going to just leave it? Because it's been my experience that if it was in 1922 of the horse accident, in actual fact, it could be 1932. You know, years go by so quickly. So what is really the rule in there? Do we have to verify this information? Because if you don't verify the information, me, the author, gets a bad name that I'm not accurate.
Okay, that's why you will say that during the interview with Mrs. So-and-so, she described to us that in such a year, this uncle of hers, da la la la, and it covers you, 100%. Or you can make a little asterisk and say this was recorded at the interview. Covers you 100%, because the person, what happened now is the person might have not recovered 100% from that, and then his family knew he was walking with a limp. But reading your book now, suddenly this one story revealed really why he was walking with a limp, because nobody asked him, why did you walk with a limp? But your story really reflect the true, if it doesn't matter what year it were, but what really happened. So it was just a bad rider.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Petro.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Do we have access to these recordings in the archives?
Yeah, that Naros
Mm?
is the place where you start searching for communities. So you'll say, for instance, you want to find something about Brackenfell. You might find something about the riots and so on. But if you type in the town's name, you'll find recordings that were done in that area. So you can really try and see what you can find, because then you'll see they list the people's names and they list the recording, that the date when the recording was done. But in archives, you'll find much less than you'll find in the libraries of those communities. So libraries in those communities and museums in those communities take the rest, and sometimes take the nice ones, how to make the best cake, how to train the best horse. You know, those type of stories stays in the communities, and it's not preserved. And those are the. It's very sad that that decision were made to sort of separate the type of stories and what happened to them in the future. Because if you're part of a project like this, if they record on a day and they record 50 stories, and your story for you tell your family is going to be preserved for the future, and they go to Narrows and they don't find it there, you know, it's really it's putting you off. But people doing those recordings, they say to them they will make a decision, so they must just record, come and talk, and they take video of them, and they take you know, it's twofold. So they take the recording like this, and they take a video as well of the person at that specific time. Just the way that government is trying to record, but leaving something in the community itself, so that everything is not just taken to Cape Town or Pretoria, but it stays there for the community. But most communities don't have museums. Elmarie can tell us that there's not always museums. There's not always libraries. And the places that they use is church halls. So then it's taken away. So if there's none of these formal structures in place, it doesn't stay, it goes. Okay. Good. Okay. It's not destroyed. So don't fear about that. So you can always contact the archive and say, okay, you know you were in Wuppertal at this specific time. Give me a list of the people that you interviewed. So it is trackable, and that recording is trackable of that specific person, and you can tell them you want access to that, because you access to information, give you access to that specific recording. Okay.